You're on Team Human, conscious intervention in the machine, an opportunity to metabolize the collective despair and compost it into new possibility. The great unraveling may be scary, but it's our opportunity to weave something better together. Let's redefine what's possible. I'm Douglas Rushkoff, and I'm on Team Human. Playing for Team Human today, author and integrator, my friend Jeremy Lent. Jeremy will be helping us investigate the patterns of thought that have led our civilization to its current crisis of sustainability and develop the patterns of thought we need to get through to the other side. It's time to intervene on behalf of people and all living things. I'm Douglas Rushkoff, and we're all on Team Human. I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Everyone's Earth, maker of Kobe dryer sheets, for supporting this show and making a lot of this possible. Kobe dryer sheets are actually cool dryer sheets. It's not like the dryer sheets your mom had, those plastic things. They're totally cotton, biodegradable, natural. If you use the scented ones, it's these essential oils and all that. They make your clothes nice, and they make the world just fine. So check them out, Kobe dryer sheets. I went to California this past month to do 2 talks. One was at the inauguration of this new place. It's called Point Reyes Reality Investigation Center. Right? Say what? Point Reyes, right? California, that kind of on the coast there in Marin, like Northwest Marin. Point Reyes Reality Investigation Center. Yeah, it's meant to be a space for retreats and workshops and discussions dedicated to the study of consciousness, perception, and the elusive nature of reality. Think of it like Esalen Institute meets the telepathy tapes. Right? Like ESP, remote viewing, and all housed adjacent to the places where Philip K. Dick wrote most of his books. How could I turn a gig like that down? And it was a wild evening. It was this big dinner with everyone from Are You Serious and Rudy Rucker to Amelia Rose Barlow and Philip Rosedale. And I got to do the one talk. It was like this crazy honor. I was embarrassed to be the one who gets to do the talk, which is almost silly because everybody's just talking. But I did the talk, and I did it rather than preparing it. I did it off the cuff, kind of out of respect to these people who I felt deserved some direct channeling and live conjuring. And 2 days later, another reason I could go right then, I got to do this opening night provocation down in Palo Alto for Institute for the Future's 50th anniversary 10-year forecast. So I spoke about the intentional collapse of civilization, stuff you've heard here, and what we can do about it. And I got a few people agitated, which is my nature. I like that. But I had this one free day between those 2 events, and I used it to go up to Sebastopol for a retreat of activists and change makers called Denizens, organized by the great organizer and activist Jenny Stefanati. And long story short, my friend and co-mentor, a collaboro mentor, we mentor each other, I guess, Jeremy Lent, who was on this show maybe 5 years ago for the book Patterning Instinct. He was planning to go up to Denizens the very same day, right? Fate. And he offered to drive me up. So then what better way to spend an hour in a car with a guy like Jeremy than recording a Team Human? So here's me and Jeremy Lent, author of Patterning Instinct, The Web of Meaning, and he's got a new book he's just finishing called Eco-Civilization. Here we are in a car on Pacific Coast Highway, driving north, having the conversation we would have had, I think, anyway. So imagine redwoods, curvy roads, cliffs overlooking the ocean, and this wonderful smells, and 2 great friends catching up after much too long. So, dude, I'll be honest. Part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation is your books and this last manuscript I just wrote or read are quite reassuring, I guess, bright, hopeful. And I've been in a funk. I'm
Yeah.
making these very positive, almost rabbinic monologues.
Uh-huh.
I just did one about what I'm calling the intentional collapse.
Uh-huh.
Basically, Naomi Klein disaster capitalism, except as I look at our government, they're like, and our elite, they believe there's a fixed amount of stuff. There's not enough for everybody, that the pyramid's coming down, capitalism's coming down, climate
Right.
change is happening. So get as rich as you possibly can and build a big military to protect what you've won off them
Right.
before the end.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at that, and I'm also trying to metabolize what feels like our collective grief,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I cry a lot. I
Yeah.
feel like we were put in Eden, and look what
Yeah.
we've done.
Yes.
And it's hard. So I've moved into the only place I felt like I could, was sort of shifting from being this agent of change activist to more of an agent of care, sort of hospice doula.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess I'm interested to know, well, I mean, we're adults now, so it's like I've lived a good life. So whatever happens, I've done really well. I've had a good time here. I mean, before we get to the other stuff, are you sad, afraid?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm a lot of things about this place we're living in right now. So, yeah, sad to an extreme. And I mean, a sense of deep, deep grief for all the incredible damage that this civilization has caused and is causing even more day by day. Afraid being in a country, for starters, that is, basically has shifted to this proto-fascist regime, and quite literally afraid for the implications of just speaking my mind along with all those others who are in even far more dangerous positions than me.
Right.
So both of those things very much so. And at the same time, what I feel like I'm driven by most of all is just the sense that as we go into these darker times, we basically have this space, what I call it's like an unraveling of a system that has been in place for really 500 years, ever since the rise of colonialism and the scientific revolution and stuff. And it's frightening and it's terrifying, and it may lead to this autocratic fortress Earth, this sort of techno-autocracy that we seem to be getting stuck in right now. It may lead to total collapse, which would be the absolute most devastating experience ever to happen to humanity. Terrifying prospects. But it opens up these degrees of freedom of just a possibility of transformation, in my mind, to what is actually available to us, what is possible. And to me, that is what is worth living for. I mean, to me, any one of us that's in a position of relative privilege, there's billions of people on this earth today who can barely struggle just to survive another week, another month, just to give some kind of basic life to their own children. And that's just the reality that this whole system has brought to them. But for those of us who do have degrees of freedom, it feels to me there's a place for despair, and I basically have this big despair, sort of green-eyed monster. Well, not monster. I like to kind of hold it more lovingly.
More
actually.
like a Sesame Street monster.
Right, exactly. You got it. Just going, this is so fucked up. We're headed for disaster. Come on, let's face it. There's nothing that's so obvious. This is where we're going. And I hold that. I hold that every day. But ultimately, any degrees of freedom I have is like all about diving into what is actually possible.
Right. And I play that game a lot, which is, okay, as if Philip Rosedale would say, we're playing on hard mode. It's a game. Okay, we've leveled. There's a lot more things to shoot at or to deal with. But when I think, okay, the pyramidal society that we're living in, this society or this economy that's based in accumulation and acquisition and moving higher up the pyramid is, like all pyramidal societies, is finally collapsing of its
Yeah.
own structural weight. And at least that means, oh, the change is coming. Right.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
then I think, so change is coming. They know it, right? Which is why they're preparing for the worst and building armies and building walls.
Yeah.
But if we know it too, we can go, okay, so if change is coming, how can we work together to make this change as pleasant as possible, as painless as possible for as many people as possible? Because the change also means possibility. There's cracks in this thing.
It's almost like there's two things. One is the change itself. How can we make it as I like the pleasant as possible, but even if it's just as least damaging or as much compassion and care for suffering as possible. But to me, equally important, ultimately more important, but I don't want to take away from the importance of that first step, but is how can we make it lead towards a transformation towards a different paradigm?
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is where the real magic is. Are you familiar, Douglas, with the adaptive cycle model of change? It's this kind of model that systems scientists have developed over decades about essentially how change happens in all living systems, everything from as small as a cell to as large as an ecosystem or organism or human, or whatever. It works pretty much every case. And it's almost like a spiral. And it's like the adaptive cycle model says that every system like that, it goes through a growth phase, then a conservation phase, which can last for a long time, where it's very difficult to change something because everything's tightly interconnected.
Right.
But then you go through a release phase, almost like that things get overgrown, or like a forest, which then gets overgrown, then has a forest fire.
Right.
And that release phase is terrifying, and it can be, like a market crash, whatever, or like what. But then the fourth phase, moving into the next sort of cycle, is really, it's a phase of regrowth. It's a phase of like reorientation, and regeneration. And the thing is that in that phase, that's where there's amazing degrees of freedom. Like in a forest, for example, like seeds that could never have gotten established when the forest was doing strong, they can blow in, and the whole area could look different.
Well,
the next fight.
And then, what I've been wondering about in that scenario is just how weird and different can the next thing be?
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, if we're really transitioning to another system, then it doesn't just have to be even some mutual aid version of market economics. What if it's an age where non-local consciousness could be that weird? That's why you said that's where the magic happens. I'm wondering if I'm taking that literally. What if that's where what looks like magic actually happens? The sort of, regeneration on a level that would make, Rudolf Steiner's biodynamics, blush.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I'm so with you. You're speaking my language, like I said. It's like
orgone accumulators? Dude, that's nursery school, right?
I got it. and so I basically spent the last really 5 years of my life looking exactly at this. Essentially, so I've written this book, going to be published some months from now, Eco-Civilization, right? Making a world that works for all. And basically what it's about is this examination of what it would look like, essentially, if we changed the operating system of our entire civilization.
Right.
So if you think about right now, for the last literally 500 years, we've had a civilization building based on extraction and exploitation. And, the economic manifestation of that, it's like this, based on this worldview of separation. The economic manifestation of that is capitalism. See everything as a resource to exploit, every person as a resource to exploit. I mean, corporations are clear about it. They call them human resources, right? They don't even make the...
No, and it's not even just us that have done this. We've seen, it happened to the Aztecs. It happened to the Egyptians.
Well, this is where I think there's a difference. It's absolutely true that these kind of hierarchical civilizations have come and gone, and they've been different versions of what's called the wealth pump, right? Totally true. And in fact, there's this great book I'm reading right now by Luke Kemp called
Yeah, I just
Goliath's
had him
Curse.
on the
Oh,
show. That was
great,
what
wonderful.
I'm thinking
you
about,
did.
the
Yeah.
difference
Yeah,
between these
exactly.
pyramidal civilizations and these more
exactly.
horizontal ones.
Exactly. And so we're on that. But my thesis is that with the rise of the scientific revolution, early modern Europe, with the rise of modernism, of this modernist worldview, it's almost like that wealth pump got automated. It's like it had to be cranked
Right.
originally, and then suddenly it was like whoosh, and it's like next level.
Right. It's
And
not just automated, but turbocharged
and now,
abstracted.
yeah. And then now, in the last few decades, with the rise of internet and the rise of this kind of whole different level of technology, and even with AI now, it's almost like it goes to yet another level. And the point about that is that it's because it's really because it's just a whole different level of that kind of wealth pump and the resource exploitation. It's also taken everything to the place where we have this is one global civilization. In the old days,
Right.
if the Mesopotamians collapsed, the Chinese would be virtually totally unaffected. They barely even know what was happening. But now we're really in one system, which means that collapse is not just the end of another pyramidal thing, let's start again. It's basically all over in many ways for whatever humans can actually do of benefit on this earth. There'd still be humans around, most likely, but there's I think, a convincing argument that if we really lost this all, there'd never be rebuilding, because all the coal, the easy access to coal, metals, everything else, we've used up. So we could look at indefinite
yeah, but also
of slavery and just
that's the best case scenario. In that case, I mean, I feel like this civilization kind of can't collapse until we've come up with a way for the next civilization to safeguard the spent fuel rods of our nuclear power plants. Which that's an ongoing. They don't just go away. If you have, 1,000 Chernobyls, the planet's over.
Yeah, and that's a whole other. Plus, of course, the process of this kind of unraveling could lead to even the worst case scenario of a nuclear war, and
it's just a faster pulling of that same plug.
But
you just don't get. We don't get the road.
Yeah,
we don't get. Oh, so many people died, but there's still a few 100,000 survivors left to walk the planet and try to get to the Bronze Age. That doesn't happen with the amount of nuclear maintenance that needs to be done.
So I think that the upshot of all that is that those of us who actually care about life on Earth and care about human solidarity, which is the vast majority of human beings.
Oh, yeah.
That it's really incumbent on us to do everything we can to just immerse ourselves into the possibility that we could actually reweave society's fabric even while it's unraveling.
Right, exactly.
And that's hard. I'm not saying like,
we're doing it simultaneously. Right, it's not sequential. It has to happen in parallel.
Done.
Yeah.
It can be done.
Yeah.
And so like this book that I wrote actually shows how it can be done. There's so many groups of people in the world right now in every aspect of what we call civilization who are doing the work, who are thinking through what a world could look like. Quite simply, if we change that operating system, if instead of it being based on extraction and exploitation, it was simply based on setting the conditions for all beings to thrive on a regenerated Earth. So simple. And when I say that, I would imagine that the vast bulk of anybody who heard that idea of a civilization based on that would say, well, of course, that's so obvious. That's what we should be doing.
Right.
And yet, it's not done. And yet, there are people who've already thought through what it would look like. So what I'm talking about is not a utopia. It's not some sort of vision of, well, wouldn't it be nice? But of course, that'll never happen. We're talking about ways of organizing ourselves as human beings that are already being experimented or already being done and already being thought through in levels of detail, so that if we could only weave that new fabric together, we'd have a beautifully functioning, like wonderful civilization that it would be a pleasure to be born into and actually be able to flourish in as human beings. What's stopping us getting there is, one, just this realization of what's actually available, which we can change by really giving voice to those people who have thought it through.
Right.
The
You mean
major thing,
the overarching belief that we have such fixed and limited resources that there's not enough to go around. You mean?
well, that is one of basically the sort of zero-sum game, overarching
Right.
belief, if you will. But I think ultimately, even beyond that, is that famous phrase from Margaret Thatcher years ago, with the acronym TINA, right? There is no alternative. What I see as the overarching belief above all is that the only way for humans to organize themselves is according to basically capitalism.
You know, as we were driving in the car through all those redwoods, and I could smell the forest, I thought, God, this smells almost as good as Kobe dryer sheets. Okay, not really, but I was looking for a way to let you know that Kobe dryer sheets really make this show possible. They support us both as a sponsor and as they're real members of the team. They write me when there's been a good monologue and say when they've been inspired, and it's a really good thing. And I like it so much more than just having those random ads from the podcast platform, which like Blue Chews and the Marines and God knows what, because Kobe dryer sheets are a biodegradable thing replacing an icky product, and it's the first product of theirs that's going to be replacing a whole bunch of icky products. So watch out for Kobe dryer sheets and more from Everyone's Earth soon. There is no alternative is the realization of, what Jacques Ellul defined as propaganda. He's the media theorist who said that successful propaganda creates a world where there's only one perspective.
Exactly.
And that perspective comes from everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and that, by the way, I think the most compelling description of that I've come across is by Antonin Gramsci, this notion of cultural hegemony, where you basically, because he was developing these ideas in prison in Mussolini's fascist Italy in the 1930s.
Right.
And the idea of cultural hegemony is this recognition that basically asking the question, how do these small elites manage to actually exert such control over the vast bulk of the people who are suffering from their oppression? And the way they do it is by basically getting their lieutenants, which are all basically the public intellectuals and the maybe religious authorities, or maybe the nowadays economists, or lawyers. All these groups of people are essentially the lieutenants for this elite, giving the sense that this is the worldview, this is the world we have today. So when somebody sort of reads, I don't know, you open up, if a curious mind might, open up the media and to take a look, people will come across as people like Steven Pinker or whatever, saying, this is the best we can do, and this is what we should be doing. And they don't give this sense that there is an alternative, where there actually is.
Right.
And that's cultural hegemony.
Right. And those of us who envision alternatives are increasingly labeled as crazy at best,
right, exactly.
Or terrorist at worst, because you're imagining outside the delusion.
Exactly.
And it's strange, which is why, again, we go back to that word magic. I mean, I always avoided magic, but then became much better friends with Mitch Horowitz, who writes a lot about the occult and magic, and started to see it as a battle worth fighting for.
Tell me, how do you define magic? I'm curious.
That's the thing. I mean, at this point, I would define magic as any faith in the improbable. Which
right? Yes. Yeah.
In a world that's basically
I love that.
surrendered itself to the algorithms and statistical analysis. It's what artificial intelligence is so far, is reverting us to the mean. It's like in the mean in both senses of the word.
Right.
But it's like right.
I love that. So in a way, magic is almost like a cousin to the notion of faith. This notion of just like, and I mean, to me, I'm affected by that. It's the word to me that really means a lot recently is devotion. The sense of devotion to life, like this recognition that, if we recognize we are life, it's not that we are on the side of life or whatever. Each of us, this is what we are. We're just little tiny little manifestations of life as it's
Right.
unfolded over billions of years. And once you recognize that and you see what's going on, it's no longer a matter of like, oh, I should do some good things to support living entities in relation to this distraction. It's like, I'm hurting, I'm getting damaged, I am life. And then it's like the only question becomes, what is it that I can do in this little corporeal existence to act for the greatest benefit of life, which is what we're part of?
Right.
And then it's no longer a matter of like, well, is it going to work out? What are our chances? It's like, we got to give it everything we've got. Just like a drowning person, does everything they can to like get up to the air, to breathe in. We've got to be doing that on behalf of life itself.
Right. And it is hard. I mean, I know people who can argue against humanity, but you kind of can't argue against life. That's
Right.
really hard.
Exactly. Exactly. And yet people do.
I know.
In the
I know.
tech world, especially, you get
Exactly.
what's so interesting, and I've heard these conversations take place now,
Yes.
is like people go, well, actually, it's not about life, it's about consciousness. And this is this most almost the ultimate hubristic ego trip, because basically these are the people who are involved in developing, say, AI, and they go, the consciousness is the thing that can be immortal. And then I, as this developer, maybe, the Raymond Kurzweil fallacy, I can upload my brain so I can become like part of this godhead
Right.
of consciousness. And there's a sense, well, maybe, life could all be over a million years from now or whatever. But if we've created this AI consciousness, it can take over the galaxies. It can it can be around.
Exactly.
And then it's a sense,
Yeah.
I'm touching into infinite mortality. I've become God. And it's a real dangerous, weird, hubristic.
Yeah, but they would
delusion.
call us the biohubristic camp, right? That why do we identify why do we think biology is the only suitable home for consciousness if, and I actually believe consciousness preceded matter. I don't look at consciousness as some emergent phenomenon of matter, but whichever way you look at it, even if consciousness is just using biology as one step along the way toward its evolution through technology to some other state, you should still be kind and compassionate with us, the lower form, that was used. We're still here, even if we're only the larval stage of the, great evolution of their consciousness. The other issue is the consciousness that they're talking about preserving it's such a reactionary impulse that they're having. They don't want to be composted. They don't want to transform. They don't want to become part of whatever this is. They want to somehow maintain an individualistic form of consciousness by using a computer rather than going with whatever this is actually happening here.
Right, exactly. I think all that is true. And I don't want to depend too much on this, but I think that there are just some really basic cognitive fallacies underlying that entire notion of their kind of definition of consciousness. And really, I think ultimately what it comes down to, in my view, is the simple fact that we are life. You and I, everyone listening to this right now, is a living, breathing organism that is part of this incredible miracle of life on this earth.
And we don't even know.
And it's the only thing we know of in the universe.
Right. And even the organism that we think we are might not even be who we are. You might just be a carrier for your gut biome, which is actually calling the shots.
Right, exactly. And whatever. But the whole beauty of it is that doesn't even matter, because we're just this, whatever it is that has this sense of identity or this sense of consciousness is part of something so much bigger and so beautiful. And ultimately, this is all we know. I don't believe ultimately that there is a dead universe out there. I think there's probably incredible, innumerable different forms of self-organized entities in different worlds that could be called life, but depending on how we define it or whatever. But the point is, this is the only one we know of. And this is the most cherished quality that I think exists that we know of in the universe. And to me, it's it's almost like treachery to the very nature of who we are and the nature of life itself to want to leave that behind, to devalue that as anything other than a fundamental value. And to me, that's fundamental value of life, leading to this notion of the ability of all different manifestations of life to fulfill it themselves, what Aristotle called eudaimonia, this sense of each different entity being able to truly fulfill what it was meant to do. And that's true for human beings, this is true for ecosystems. And that, to me, is what we can actually organize our civilization according to. And that's what we're not doing. We're doing the exact opposite right now.
And when we watch CNN and see the president list anti-capitalism or being against patriarchal family values as official contributors to terror and Antifa and enemies of the state, it's hard not to also think, do I have another passport? Should I look back at my posts on Twitter from 2013? How do I protect my own family? I mean, it's hard under the kind of stress of an emerging military dictatorship. It's hard not to respond in the mindset of military dictatorship.
Right. Yes. I mean, that's right. I was just talking before about Antonin Gramsci.
Right.
He died in prison under Mussolini's rule as he was writing all these things. And there is a great danger, I think, that we are entering exactly this kind of phase in the United States, and many other countries are undergoing it already.
Right.
Yeah.
But even if we are, the trick is when you talk like that, when you talk like you just were before about entering into these new states of possibilities, understanding real life and all that, that way of processing and metabolizing and opening and contemplating really gets cut short with each new message from a friend showing election fraud or ICE raids, or it's very easy to get thrown back into one survival instincts.
I think that's true. And there are, even within survival instincts, though, there are different kinds of survival instincts available to us, right? Because one is like, let me look out for number one and shut down put the barricades up and all that stuff. But there's another form of survival instinct, which is power in community and collective power. And to me, that is what is inviting us right now to be really reaching out to others, it's just like groups like Indivisible have done such a great job of doing, and recognizing that through staying too quiet, through basically, that concept of being obedient in advance and like shutting down in case you might be in trouble, that is the way that we are all going to become further and further oppressed. That what is called for right now, as I see it, is to actually reach out to others, to let other people know, I'm here for those who are the most vulnerable, and we're here together. We've been seeing that just in the Bay Area the last few days, when we've been having this threat of sending federal forces in, and there's been lots of groups getting together, just recognizing that there is power in collective intentionality. And that's another place to me, it's another form of how the survival instinct can manifest itself.
Right. And I guess to do that, well, you have to learn to breathe.
Yes.
Right? Rather than choke.
Exactly.
So you breathe.
That's right.
And then have the what seems like courage to look at someone else in the eyes and be present with them. I've been, and I don't think it's wrong, although I get a lot of negative email about this one. I've been telling people, reach your across the aisle to your red state brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
and find whatever commonalities you have. You don't have to talk about the legality of abortion or who you voted for to be like, where do we get our water from?
Right. That's right. No, that's exactly right. And honestly, I think that's what you just kind of broached there is one of the most important things that any of us can be doing. Because the way I see it is it's not just a matter of like these two sides. There are the bad guys over there, and
Yeah.
we're the good guys, and we've got to fight together against the bad guys. Because honestly, that very paradigm, once we get that in our minds, we've already lost.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
it's not about, and I mean, even if we won some sort of battle, we lost. I hate to even continue with this metaphor, but we lost the war because
we lost the
whole
peace.
point is we
Yeah.
lost the peace. Exactly, exactly. Because what we're talking about, and the way that life has been so successful on this earth, and the way we can set a future for our whole human system, is based on this notion of solidarity, based on this notion of pro-social, based on the fact that as humans, we actually are happiest together when we are working in groups, in cooperative communities, working basically in symbiosis with the living earth. All those things. But as soon as we have this polarizing us against them, that is the very alternative way of being that this world has gone through so disastrously so far. So that's why reaching out is the best thing we can do, because almost anybody who seems to be on that other side, if you will, is not acting on the other side. They care about the same things ultimately we care about. They want to feel love. They want to feel that connection. With the exception of a very few numbers of, true psychopaths or
And they've
sociopaths.
Right, and they've been allowed. The sociopaths have been allowed to flourish and
That's right.
gather constituents, partly because even the so-called liberal society that the left thinks it's protecting is colonial, cruel, and
Oh, absolutely.
horrid.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, our society is designed right now to actually incent psychopathic and sociopathic behavior.
Right.
It's designed based on greed and selfishness and giving incentives to that. And so that's why we need a different kind of system, but each of us can be living into that different system ourselves, because we can be creating that kind of life-affirming place of solidarity in what we're doing, and reaching out to people who may superficially seem to have different political views is one of the most powerful things we can do in the interests of life.
It's funny, people email to know, well, what can I do? What can I do? And then whatever I might say, whether it's a generic sort of response of meeting your neighbors, establish mutual aid, make friends, or if it's specific to what they're saying, they always feel like it's an unsatisfying, that it's not complete. But the fact is, none of the things any of us do is going to be complete. If they were, then we only need one of us.
That's right. That's right.
I feel like it's okay if what you're doing is making sandwiches for people who are protesting something. Good. You're making sandwiches.
Absolutely.
It's so perfectly fine. It's almost more about your comportment, the way you engage with everybody.
Absolutely.
On an almost behavioral level. As we were driving in the car through all those redwoods, and I could smell the forest, I thought, God, this smells almost as good as Kobe dryer sheets. Okay, not really, but I was looking for a way to let you know Kobe dryer sheets really make this show possible. They support us both as a sponsor and as they're real members of the team. They write me when there's been a good monologue and say when they've been inspired, and it's a really good thing. And I like it so much more than just having those random ads from the podcast platform, which
I think that's completely right. It's like this notion of the fractal, and we all basically fractal parts of a bigger ecosystem. And in just the same way that, like, for an ecosystem to be healthy, doesn't mean that all the entities should be like tigers or massive trees. It means that there should be trees and mycelial fungal networks and flowers and insects. And the whole set of things is what makes an ecosystem fully alive and healthy. And similarly, the ecosystem for change is the same way. I think the important thing is to be driven by what is really makes you come alive and be reaching out, really to reach out with love, lead with love for those around you, for like that future that you want, and do it in a way that actually where you can take your own skill, your own benefit. Like this question I was touching on earlier, we can all be asking, what can I do for the greatest benefit of all life? And the answer is it's unique to each one of us, depending on where we are. And sometimes just making sandwiches for those protesters, the very best thing you can do when it's done with love, when it's done in that place of solidarity.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, because then, I mean, a lot of people are just not doing, jobs that they think are contributing to the common good.
Right.
Oh, I'm doing some kind of mortgage actuarial work. It's actually designed to put people out of their homes. I'm the foreclosure guy.
Yeah.
And again, I guess it's a matter of, well, then you're in this system, but then you look for opportunities to, slow the wheels, to soften the gears. Not necessarily, sabotage at work. It doesn't have to get to the, processed world. Chris Carlson, it was about, sabotaging your workplace if you thought it was bad.
Yeah.
But somehow being an agent of change in there, or being...
Yes, I think that's right. And I think that it's a good thing to also just push the envelope a bit. And if you do find yourself that if you sort of have been doing a job like you just described, and you do become awake to the greater systemic harm that that role is causing, then there are trade-offs, of course. You might have a partner and kids and a mortgage and all those things that force you to have to keep doing what you don't want to do. But it might be a great thing to set the intention to explore the possibilities of how can you maybe take that knowledge and apply that to something else? What would it look like if you actually ended up taking that knowledge and using it to help those who are getting basically destroyed by the system in some kind of capacity to help them to learn to navigate the system, to help them to manage. So there's ways that even those kind of skills could be turned around in a more positive way. And my point is to set the intention of that. I'm not saying like suddenly you should feel this guilt if you're doing that and you realize you can't get off that sort of hamster wheel that you're stuck on. But there are ways to set that intention and explore that possibility that over time might lead to a real transformation in your own life.
I'm amazed, we're talking about grief and potential and this beautiful little car ride, and the stuff we're driving through is, I could cry at the beauty of creation.
Yeah.
I'm just so people know I'm not tripping or anything. I promise you, I'm not tripping. But I'm with a beloved friend driving through the redwood forest of California.
Yeah.
And it's like, even amidst everything in the horror, it's also there's a bliss state that is so accessible. It's so ready that it brings tears. It brings tears. Now, what is that? It's not, I'm not sad.
Yeah.
I'm crazy. I mean, my audience is just wondering, why the fuck is Rushkoff crying all the time?
Yeah.
But it's like, there's an explosion of tears of both of the grief and the appreciation in the same moment.
I just wanted to say on that, riffing off that, it brings to mind this phrase I came across actually when I was a student of English literature many years ago. It's this quote from William Wordsworth in this poem called Tintern Abbey, and is this phrase, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused. And then it goes on, whose dwellings are in the light of setting suns, and I've always felt so strongly attracted to that sense, exactly, and that's that. It says so much more, and that is, I think, what the human spirit this is our deep drive for meaning that connects with the deepest meaning in life. And it is so, it's like for us to feel that connection around that is
Right.
it is one of the most sublime experiences
And
available.
I don't even know that it's meaning. In other words, once it has meaning, it feels like it's almost like a sign or an insight or a something. But it's that metabolism itself. It's
Yeah, well, I guess, it's sort of like the way I define meaning myself. Like, because I wrote this book, The Web of Meaning.
right,
And to me, meaning itself is really a function of our connectedness.
right,
And so it's not that meaning, it's that meaning is this realization of that deep interconnectedness with all the different parts within ourselves. So meaning is not some end point. It's not like purpose.
right.
It's very different from purpose, like some periods, like that's where we're going. But it's like what arises out of that deep immersion into our interconnectedness with all the great
Right.
interconnections everywhere, like this
Right. That
Indra's
it's
web.
pre-linguistic,
Oh,
pre-symbolic.
yeah.
It's I mean the idea is I guess it'd be so embodied that it's beyond embodied.
Yeah,
You
see,
know.
it's almost like part of our deepest connection as living conscious creatures with all of the universe.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we create this, we keep doing this sort of simulation of it. Like instead of experiencing awe, we have these technologies that give us vertigo,
Right.
which is almost like it.
Yeah.
Um, but not. It's like the great thing about the simulation is to show us what it's not.
Yes, that's a it's the lack is what
Yeah.
is most interesting in that. Yeah.
But if you live on the artificial sweeteners, eventually, that becomes that reality. Then
That's
you're
right.
once removed.
And that's basically the basis of capitalism is to
Right.
keep people always not quite getting enough in order to be on that what's called the hedonic treadmill. So that you always need more, you always need more. And if you need more, you're not able to get it from your own internal experience. You have to get it from the external manifestations. Then you are basically contributing to the continued growth of capitalism and the wealth of
Right.
those billionaires because you go buy, you need the status or you need
Yeah.
the experience
But
or you need the.
no quantity of Cheetos or social media likes or AI affirmations will fill that place.
No. And that's the whole thing. That it's well, there's this incredible metaphor of the Wendigo monster that was this legend from the Ojibwe tribes in like North Central America. And is the Wendigo monster was this monster that had a heart of ice and it was always consuming. Always hungry, and it would want to eat little children, which is why they scared the kids in the campfires of
Ah,
the story. But if it got you, if it got hold of you, and you got bitten by the Wendigo monster, you became a Wendigo monster yourself. And the terrible thing experience of the Wendigo is that they can never get fulfilled. The more they consumed, the hungrier they were. So it was this ongoing. And so when the Europeans came to the Ojibwe, and they looked at how the Europeans were driven by this need for gold and furs and always more and more and more. They basically saw them as Wendigos.
right,
And that's so it's all, and the notion is like Wendigos are like this metaphor, almost like this virus that has taken hold of our entire civilization. And really, that's where corporations are almost like the Wendigo Inc., the actual economic manifestation of this Wendigo monster. And
right.
that's what we're driven by. And so I think one of the most important things any of us can do is recognize that and get off that hedonic treadmill, like essentially inoculate ourselves against Wendigo.
If we do, though, I mean, this has always been my concern when I look at history, is if we are a Wendigo-free society, networked and loving and sweet, and spending our resources on mutual aid instead of the military, then doesn't the next violent Wendigo civilization
Yeah,
clobber us?
exactly. This is something that David Sloan Wilson, the evolutionary biologist, has written very well about. Is this recognition that really there's only been a few times in life's evolution on Earth that cooperation as a driver has actually led to a breakthrough in the complexity of life. And each of these times, it only happens when freeloaders, essentially, like that aggressive civilization that comes and
Right.
gobbles you up, basically, when there's a way to overcome freeloaders through other more important powers. But when that has happened, we've led things like multicellular life, or things like social insects or humans. We're one of the greatest cooperators, evolutionary
Right.
speaking.
Right. So you look at evolution, it would be
So,
like, not that this is a correct example, but it's like, oh, cells are having problems with these little creatures that are bothering them. And it's like, oh, let's just call them mitochondria and incorporate them into our thing.
But the thing is, it's mutual beneficial synergy. So it's not just gobbling them up, but the mitochondria themselves say, oh, this works for us too.
Right.
Because we
got all these ribosomes to work with.
And then we'll be almost immortal. We'll just have lots of us. And so they did great out of it too.
Yeah.
And this is the point, mutually beneficial synergy. But if you look at imagine two groups of sort of quasi-humans, if you will. And one group, they're all aggressive. They're all these selfish motherfuckers out to get their own thing. And another group, they actually work together for mutual solidarity. And imagine they're battling each other. Well, the group that is working together for mutual solidarity is probably going to win because they're far more powerful than those individuals that are and each looking out for themselves. But the thing is, what is needed to get to that next level of evolution is us to find ways to organize ourselves as human beings, as a collective that can actually take us to this place where the freeloaders don't, in fact, end up, squashing on us, basically. And nomadic hunter-gatherers figured out ways to do that. When they worked together collaboratively, and when some big man came along, figured they were so great and wonderful and strong, the rest of the community would get together to actually stop them from doing that. They'd ostracize them because they saw them as dangerous. That all got lost with agriculture and sedentism. But I think the ultimate point is that we can actually create conditions for our entire society to work in that pro-social way. That's what I feel is available to us. And that's what that's what our challenge and our opportunity is about.
And that's, interestingly enough, that's what I've been calling Team Human.
Yes, exactly. I know.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thanks, Jeremy Lent, for being on Team Human. I do love you.
And Douglas, I love you too. I love Team Human, and I love what you're doing in the world. And I so appreciate you. Thank you, Douglas.
Okay, more soon. And I love you all too. Thanks for being on Team Human. Our guest today was Jeremy Lent, author of the upcoming Eco-Civilization. You can find out more about him at jeremylent.com. Please support Team Human by subscribing to this show for free. You can support Team Human even more by going to teamhuman.fm and clicking on support, or go to patreon.com/teamhuman. You'll get the ad-free version of the show and lots more. This episode of Team Human was produced by Joshua Chapdelaine and edited by Luke Robert Mason. I'm Douglas Rushkoff, and you've been on Team Human, our last best hope for peeps.
Did you know laundry dryer sheets are actually plastic, and the first ingredient is crude oil? It's in your clothes, on your skin, and piling up in landfills. That's why we invented Cobi, spelled C-O-B-I. C-O for cotton and B-I for biodegradable. The first all-cotton, 100% biodegradable dryer sheet that works better than those toxic alternatives. No chemicals, no plastic. Just soft, static-free clothes that are safe for your family and the planet. Save 10% on your first order at CobiDryerSheets.com. That's CobiDryersheets.com.